She woke before the sun, the same way she always did. The room was small, barely wide enough for the narrow bed and a metal chair with one loose leg. The air was cold, and the walls carried the quiet sounds of other tenants getting ready for their own long days. She sat up slowly, rubbing her hands together to warm them, and reminded herself to breathe. Another day meant another chance to survive. She washed her face with cold water, tied her hair back neatly, and put on the same plain uniform she had worn for months. It was clean, carefully pressed, but faded from too many washes. She checked her phone. No missed calls. No messages. That was normal. She slipped it into her pocket and stepped outside. The city was already moving. Buses groaned, vendors shouted, and people hurried past without looking at one another. She walked to the bus stop with her head down, counting her steps the way she often did when her thoughts felt heavy. The ride to the mansion took nearly an hour. She always stood, holding the same pole, swaying with each turn. No one noticed her. She was used to that too. The mansion stood at the end of a quiet road, hidden behind tall gates and trimmed trees. Guards nodded as she entered. Inside, everything was polished and perfect. The floors reflected the lights above. The air smelled faintly of flowers and expensive cleaning products. It felt like another world, one she could enter but never belong to. She changed her shoes, tied on her apron, and began her work. She cleaned the hallways first, moving carefully so her footsteps made no sound. She dusted furniture that cost more than she would earn in years. She wiped windows that looked out over gardens she would never walk through freely. Her hands moved quickly, practiced and steady. Other workers passed by. Some greeted her with quick nods. Others ignored her. A few whispered among themselves, glancing her way and then looking off again. She noticed, but she pretended not to. Pretending was something she had learned to do very well. The owner of the mansion was rarely around, but his presence was felt everywhere. His photos hung on the walls, his name was spoken with respect and fear, and his rules were followed without question. To her, he was more of an idea than a person. Powerful, distant, untouchable. She had seen him only a few times, always from far away. He walked fast, spoke little, and never looked at the staff for long. When he passed, people straightened their backs and lowered their voices. She did the same, keeping her eyes on the floor. Late that morning, he was assigned to clean a quiet sitting room near the back of the house. It was rarely used, but it had to be perfect at all times. She worked slowly, careful not to miss a spot. The room was peaceful, and for a moment, she allowed herself to relax. As she wiped a table near the window, she noticed something left behind. A phone. It was sleek and expensive, resting between two cushions on the sofa. She froze. Her heart began to beat faster. She knew she should report it immediately. Touching personal items was against the rules. She looked around the room. No one was there. After a moment of hesitation, she picked up the phone carefully, holding it by the edges. The screen lit up with missed calls and messages. She did not read them. She turned the screen off and placed the phone on the table where it would be clearly visible. Just then, footsteps echoed in the hallway. She stepped back, her hands behind her back, and lowered her gaze. A man entered the room. She recognized him immediately. It was the owner of the mansion. He stopped when he saw her. His eyes moved from her face to the phone on the table. For a brief second, the room felt too quiet. "That's mine," he said. "Yes," she replied softly. "I found it on the sofa." I was about to inform security. He nodded once, picked up the phone, and checked the screen. "You did the right thing." That was it. No smile, no thank you. Just a simple statement. He walked out without another word. She stood still for a moment, her heart racing. Then she let out a slow breath and returned to her work. To him, it was nothing. To her, it was the closest she had ever come to being noticed. By lunchtime, the incident was already forgotten in her mind. She sat alone in the staff area, eating rice from a small container. Around her, conversations buzzed. Some laughed. Some complained. She listened quietly, her thoughts drifting back to her worries. Rent was due soon. Her mother needed medicine. The numbers in her head never stopped adding up. Across the room, two workers leaned close together, speaking in low voices. One of them glanced toward her and then looked away quickly. She felt a small knot form in her stomach. She had felt that look before, though she did not know why. In the afternoon, the atmosphere in the house seemed to shift. People whispered more. Eyes followed her as she walked by. A supervisor watched her longer than usual. She kept working, telling herself she was imagining things at one point. She overheard a fragment of a sentence as she passed a doorway. Saw her with him this morning. She stopped for a split second, then continued walking. Her hands trembled slightly as she cleaned. She tried to focus on her tasks, but the uneasy feeling grew heavier with every hour. By early evening, she was called into a small office. The supervisor sat behind a desk, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Another staff member stood near the door. "You were in the sitting room earlier today," the supervisor said. "Yes," she answered, "and you spoke with him." She said again, her voice calm though her chest felt tight. The supervisor leaned back slightly. "Be careful," he said. "People talk." She did not understand what he meant, but she nodded anyway. She was dismissed without further explanation. When she returned to her duties, she felt exposed, as if something invisible had been placed on her back. Whispers followed her. Faces turned away when she looked up. The house that had always felt cold now felt hostile. As her shift ended, she changed her shoes and walked out through the gates. The sky was dark. The road was quiet. She waited for the bus, replaying the day in her mind, searching for a mistake she might have made. She could not find one. On the bus ride home, her phone buzzed. A message from a coworker she barely spoke to. "Are you okay?" She stared at the screen, confused. She typed back, "Why?" No reply came. When she reached her room, she sat on the bed without turning on the light. The silence pressed in around her. Something had changed. She could feel it, even if she did not yet understand it. That morning, she had gone to work, as usual, invisible and unnoticed. By nightfall, her name was being spoken in whispers she could not hear. Shaped into a story she had not told, she lay down, staring at the ceiling, unaware that by the next sunrise, a lie would begin to control her life in ways she could never have imagined. She barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the looks from earlier in the day. The way people had glanced at her and then quickly looked away. Her room felt smaller than usual, the ceiling too close. When morning came, she sat on the edge of the bed for a long time before standing up. She told herself to stay calm. Whatever strange mood had filled the house yesterday would surely pass. She followed her usual routine. Wash, dress, tie her hair back. As she stepped outside, the air felt heavy, as if the city itself was holding its breath. On the bus, she noticed people laughing, talking loudly, living their normal lives. She wondered how easily things could change without warning. When she arrived at the mansion, something felt wrong immediately. The guards who usually greeted her with a nod barely acknowledged her. One of them watched her walk through the gate longer than necessary. She lowered her eyes and kept moving. Inside, the quiet tension from the day before had not faded. It had grown. Conversation stopped when she entered a room. Doors closed softly behind her. She felt like a stranger in a place she had worked for months. She was given her tasks for the day without explanation. The supervisor's tone was flat, distant. No eye contact. No small talk. She wanted to ask if she had done something wrong. The words stayed stuck in her throat as she cleaned the lower floor. She caught fragments of whispered conversations. "Can you believe it? So bold for someone like her. Thought she was quiet." Each sentence felt like a small cut. No one said her name, but she knew they were talking about her. Her hands shook as she folded linens. She reminded herself to breathe slowly, to focus on the work in front of her late in the morning. She was called aside by a coworker she trusted more than the others. The woman looked uncomfortable, her eyes darting around the hallway. "People are saying things," the coworker whispered. "Saying what?" she asked quietly. The coworker hesitated. "That you that you tried to get close to him, that you stayed alone with him on purpose. Her heart dropped. That's not true. I know, the coworker said quickly. But not everyone does. Before she could say more, someone walked past, and the coworker stepped away, pretending to fix her apron. The message was clear. Talking to her openly was already risky. She returned to her duties, her mind spinning. She replayed the moment in the sitting room again and again. She had followed every rule. She had done nothing wrong. Yet the story growing around her made her feel guilty without reason. By midday, the lie had grown larger. It moved from whispers among staff to sharp looks from management. A supervisor stopped her in the hallway and asked her where she had been that morning, who she had spoken to, why she had been alone in that room. The questions felt less like curiosity and more like an accusation. She answered honestly, calmly, but she could feel that honesty was no longer enough. During lunch, she sat alone again. The room buzzed with quiet excitement, like something dramatic was unfolding. She noticed phones being checked more often. Messages passed quickly from one person to another. The story was spreading faster than she could keep up with. Across the room, someone laughed softly and said, "Guess even the quiet ones have plans." Her appetite vanished. She closed her container and stood up, throwing the rest away. In the early afternoon, she was summoned again, this time to a larger office. 2 supervisors were there. The air felt cold. "We've received concerns," one of them said. "Concerns about what?" She asked. "About your behavior," the other replied. She felt her face grow warm. "I've only been doing my job." They exchanged a look. "You should understand how things look," one of them said. "Perception matters here." She wanted to scream that perception was not the truth. Dead. She nodded and stood silently while they warned her to stay in her place, to avoid certain areas, to avoid unnecessary interactions. When she left the office, her legs felt weak. The house felt different now. The walls that once felt distant now felt closing in. Somewhere on the upper floor, the billionaire was going about his day, aware of how his brief words from the day before had turned into something dark. Or maybe he knew. She did not know which thought frightened her more. Later that afternoon, she noticed someone she had never seen before walking through the house, well-dressed, confident. He spoke quietly with staff members, asking questions. Every now and then, his eyes landed on her. By evening, the tension finally broke. She was called into the main office near the front of the house. Her heart pounded as she walked down the long hallway. This time, the owner of the mansion was there. He stood near the window, his back to the room. Supervisors stood nearby, stiff and serious. "You," he said, without turning around. "Yes," she replied, barely above a whisper. He turned to face her. His expression was unreadable. "I don't tolerate games," he said. "Or manipulation." She swallowed hard. "Sir, I don't understand." He stepped closer. "You were seen alone with me yesterday. People are talking. I need to know if there is anything I should be concerned about." Her chest tightened. "There is nothing," she said. "Found your phone and returned it. That's all." He studied her face, searching for something. "Is that the truth?" "Yes," she said, tears burning her eyes but refusing to fall. "I would never lie." The room was silent. The supervisors watched closely, waiting. Finally, he looked away. "This is being handled," he said. "It may go." That was it. No apology, no reassurance. She left the office feeling hollow. She knew then that the lie had reached the highest level. Even if he did not fully believe it, the doubt alone was enough to damage her. Her shift ended shortly after. As she walked out, she felt eyes on her back. Some were curious, some judgmental, few almost satisfied. On the bus ride home, her phone buzzed again. This time, there were messages. "Be careful. Yeah, they're saying bad things. Don't trust anyone right now." She stared at the screen, her hands shaking. She typed no reply. When she reached her room, she sat on the floor, leaning against the bed. For the first time in a long while, she cried. Not loudly, just quietly, letting the fear and confusion pour out. She had worked hard her whole life. She had stayed quiet, honest, careful, and still a lie had found her. As night fell somewhere else in the city, the person who started the rumor felt powerful, watching the story grow. The lie had done exactly what it was meant to do, and by the end of that day, the poor maid understood something painful. In a world ruled by money and influence, the truth did not always matter. Sometimes a lie only needed the right ears to change everything. She woke to the sound of rain tapping against the window. The air was damp, heavy with the smell of wet streets and earth. She sat on the edge of her bed, rubbing her temples, trying to prepare herself for another day in a house that had suddenly become a place of suspicion and whispers. Every step outside her room felt heavier than the day before. She got dressed in her uniform, careful to smooth out every crease, tie her hair neatly, and make sure her shoes were clean. She did not want to give anyone a reason to judge her further. Breakfast was quick, quiet, and without appetite. She had barely touched her food when she left for the bus. The streets were slick with rain, and she walked carefully, her mind already racing with the events of yesterday. When she entered the mansion, she immediately sensed the change. The usual background noise of staff moving and talking had a strange tension to it. People avoided her gaze, yet some followed with theirs just long enough to make her feel watched. The whispers had grown louder, although they still tried to be discreet. She tried to ignore it, focusing on her work, but it was impossible not to feel the weight of eyes and judgment. She began her morning chores, moving from one room to another. Every polished surface, every folded sheet, every mopped floor felt heavier because of the invisible burden on her shoulders. Her hands worked methodically, her mind alert, scanning for any signs of gossip or confrontation. Even the smallest movement of others caught her attention now. Every glance felt like an accusation, every whispered word a possible lie that could twist her life further. By mid-morning, a supervisor called her again. Her heart sank as she walked to the office, unsure of what to expect. Inside, 2 other staff members were present. Their faces were serious, almost hostile. She stood quietly, ready to explain herself again if necessary. "We've received more reports," one of them said, her voice calm but firm. "Reports?" she repeated, her voice shaking slightly. "Yes," the supervisor continued. "People are concerned about your behavior around him. We need to know if there's any truth to the claims." She took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice. "There is nothing to report. I did exactly what I was supposed to do. I found the phone and returned it, that's all." Supervisors exchanged looks. One leaned forward slightly. "We hope that is true," she said, "because appearances matter in this house. A small mistake can lead to serious consequences." She nodded, feeling the weight of their words. She left the office and returned to her tasks, her hands trembling slightly as she wiped down a table. Every room now felt like a stage where her actions were scrutinized. Every step measured and judged. By late morning, the whispers had grown into clear conversations. She overheard snippets as she passed the hallways. He's always alone. With him, how did she even get in that room? Shouldn't someone stop her? Her chest tightened. She wanted to speak up, to tell them the truth, but the words seemed useless. No one wanted to hear it, and she feared that any defense might be twisted into further suspicion. She returned to her work, each movement careful, precise, as if her survival depended on it, which, in a way, it did. In the afternoon, she was asked to deliver a message to the owner of the mansion. Her hands shook as she walked down the long hallway to the main office. The rain had stopped, leaving the grounds glistening and wet, reflecting the fading sunlight. She held the note tightly, unsure if it would be received calmly or with suspicion. When she entered the office, he looked up from his desk. His expression was unreadable, calm, yet there was a sharpness in his eyes that made her heart race. "You again," he said softly, not an accusation, but as a statement of fact. "Yes, sir," she replied, holding out the note. "This is for you." He took it without a word, glancing at her briefly before returning his attention to the paper. She stood there, frozen in place, waiting for a reaction, for a word, for a glance that could tell her she was understood or condemned. None came. After what felt like an eternity, he handed the note back to her with a slight nod. She stepped back, letting out a small, silent breath. The encounter was neutral, but the tension lingered, wrapping around her like a cold fog. She left the office and returned to her chores, trying to push away the knot in her stomach that had grown with each passing hour. Later, as she moved through the kitchen to clean, she overheard another staff member whispering to a colleague. Heard she was trying to get attention. He's too powerful. She could never. Still, people notice. She felt a surge of frustration and fear. How could a simple act of honesty be turned into something dangerous? Cleaned quietly, her hands gripping the mop tightly, trying to control the trembling that threatened to escape. By evening, she was summoned to the office again. This time, it was the owner himself, standing near the window, looking out at the wet gardens. The air was thick with tension, the fading light casting long shadows across the room. "You need to understand how serious this is," he said, turning to face her. "Rumors have reached me. I don't tolerate dishonesty or manipulation." She swallowed hard. "Sir, I swear, I have done nothing but my job. I found your phone and returned it. That is all." He studied her closely, his expression unreadable. "Are you certain?" "Yes, sir," she said, her voice trembling slightly, but her eyes steady. "I would never lie." The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating.
Oh.
The supervisors watched from the side, their faces serious. Finally, he looked away, focusing on the gardens again. "Very well," he said. "This will be monitored. Make sure nothing else happens to give people reason to talk." She nodded, relief and fear tangled together in her chest. She left the office, her legs feeling weak, the weight of the day pressing down on her. Every glance she passed, every whisper, every judgmental stare seemed to follow her, and she wondered how long she could endure this. Her shift ended, but the day was far from over. On the bus ride home, she watched the city blur past, her thoughts a tangled mess. Messages appeared on her phone again, warnings and advice from coworkers she barely trusted. "Be careful," they said. "People are saying things you don't know about." She did not respond. She stared out the window at the passing lights, trying to steady her racing heart. Each day in that house now felt like walking through a storm she could not escape. When she finally reached her room, she collapsed onto her bed, exhausted and tense. She stared at the ceiling, thinking about the lie that had grown from nothing, spreading like wildfire, changing how everyone saw her. She had done nothing wrong, yet the world around her had shifted. The night settled in quietly, but sleep would not come easily. Her mind replayed every word, every look, every whispered sentence. Tomorrow, she knew, would be another test, another chance for the lie to grow or for the truth to emerge. And she understood something deep in her heart. One day had already changed everything, and the days to come would decide if she could survive it. The morning was quiet, unusually quiet. Even the birds outside seemed hesitant to chirp. She woke slowly, her body stiff from restless sleep. Her mind was already racing before her feet touched the floor. She knew today would be another long day at the mansion, a day that might determine how long she could survive in a place where whispers had become weapons. She dressed carefully, smoothing her uniform, tying her hair back tightly, and checking her shoes. Everything had to be perfect. Even a small mistake now could be used against her. She stepped outside, the streets damp from last night's rain, and walked to the bus stop with her head down. Each step felt heavier than the last. The ride to the mansion was long, and she spent it staring out the window, lost in thought. She replayed the conversations from the previous days, the glances that had followed her, and the quiet warnings from coworkers. She knew that today would be critical. The lie that had started so small was now growing. She had to navigate carefully. When she arrived, the mansion seemed colder than usual. Guards barely acknowledged her presence. Staff moved around her with stiff smiles or avoided her gaze altogether. The tension in the air was palpable. She swallowed hard and moved forward, reminding herself to breathe, stay calm. Her tasks began as usual, cleaning and tidying rooms, dusting furniture, and mopping floors. But every step felt scrutinized. Every glance she received carried a silent accusation. She focused on her work, trying to block out the feeling of being watched. She repeated each motion carefully, as if the perfection of her work could protect her from the growing storm. By mid-morning, the situation escalated. A supervisor approached her with a stern expression. "We need to talk," he said. She followed him to a small office, her heart pounding inside. 2 other staff members were waiting, their faces serious. She stood quietly, unsure of what would be said this time. "There have been more reports," the supervisor began. "People are concerned about your interactions in the mansion. We need you to explain yourself." She took a deep breath. "I have done nothing wrong," she said. "I found a phone and returned it. I've only been doing my work." They exchanged glances. "We hope that is true," one of them said, "because appearances matter here, and even a small mistake can cause serious consequences." She nodded silently, trying to steady her racing heart. She left the office and returned to her duties, feeling the weight of suspicion pressing down on her. Every whisper, every sidelong glance, every hushed conversation seemed amplified now, filling the mansion with tension. As she cleaned, she overheard more staff talking quietly in the hallways. She was seen alone. People are saying, "Couldn't be coincidence." Her stomach knotted. How could something so small grow so quickly? She had done nothing wrong, and yet the entire house seemed ready to believe otherwise. She forced herself to focus on her tasks, trying to let the rhythm of cleaning calm her mind, but the unease never left. In the afternoon, she was called again, this time to the main office. The owner of the mansion was there, standing by the window, looking out at the gardens. The supervisors waited silently beside him. She felt a mixture of fear and hope as she stepped inside. "You need to understand how serious this situation has become," he said, turning to face her. "Rumors have reached me, and I need the truth. There is no room for dishonesty." Her chest tightened. "I swear I have done nothing but my job. I found your phone and returned it. That is all." He studied her face, searching for any sign of deceit. "Are you certain?" "Yes," she said firmly. "I would never lie." The room fell silent. The supervisors watched her closely, their expressions unreadable. Finally, he looked away, focusing on the gardens once more. "Very well. This matter will be addressed," he said. "But understand the truth matters more than appearances. Let us hope your actions reflect that." She nodded, relief and fear mingling inside her. She left the office, her legs weak and her mind racing. She returned to her chores, but the mansion felt different now. The walls seemed taller, the ceilings lower, the whispers louder. She realized that the lie had grown far beyond what she could control. Later, she was called by a trusted coworker who had quietly supported her since she started. "I've been trying to find the source," the coworker whispered. "The lie. It's been spread deliberately by someone who wants to see you in trouble." She felt a mix of relief and dread. At least now, she knew it was not random, but the knowledge did not make the situation any easier. She thanked her coworker quietly and returned to her work, knowing that the day was far from over. As evening approached, the mansion seemed to hold its breath. Every movement was careful, every glance cautious. She completed her tasks methodically, hoping to avoid further attention. Her hands were tired, her back ached, but she could not rest yet. The tension in the house was palpable, and she could feel eyes following her at every step. Finally, her shift ended. She changed her shoes, tied her hair back, and walked out through the gates. The streets were empty, the city quiet, and she walked slowly, trying to shake off the weight of the day. Her phone buzzed with messages from coworkers, warnings and advice, but she ignored them. She needed peace, even for a moment. At home, she collapsed onto her bed, staring at the ceiling. The day had been long, exhausting, and filled with tension. The lie that had started so small had grown, spreading through the mansion like wildfire. She had been honest, careful, and diligent. And yet the world around her had twisted the truth. She closed her eyes, trying to imagine a place where the whispers did not follow her, where the lies could not touch her. She thought of the moments of kindness, the small gestures from coworkers who believed her. They were her anchors, her reminders that not everything was lost. As night settled in, she knew that tomorrow could bring revelation or further conflict. The lie that had threatened to destroy her was now exposed, but the truth was beginning to emerge. Somewhere in the mansion, the real story was being pieced together, unnoticed but inevitable. She took a deep breath, letting the tension flow out slowly. She had survived 4 days of suspicion, whispers, and judgment. The days ahead would be decisive. She closed her eyes, holding on to the thought that the truth, finally, would find its way. Morning arrived with a soft glow of sunlight spilling into her small room. She sat on the edge of the bed, heart heavy but steady. The days of whispers, glances, and silent accusations had taken a toll, but today felt different. She could sense it, though she could not yet say why. Today would be decisive. The lie that had grown uncontrollably was about to face the truth. She dressed carefully, smoothing her uniform and tying her hair back with precision. Each motion was deliberate, a small act of control in a world that had tried to strip her of it. She left her room quietly, the streets still calm in the early morning. She walked to the bus stop, her mind turning over every detail, every small observation, every fragment of gossip. Nothing could be left unnoticed today. The ride to the mansion felt longer than usual. She watched the city pass by, its rhythm seeming distant, almost unreal. Her thoughts focused on the events of the past days, the small interactions, the whispers that had grown into a storm. She repeated to herself that she had done nothing wrong, that honesty was on her side, but even as she said it, she knew that words alone would not be enough. Arriving at the mansion, she felt the tension in the air immediately. Staff moved with caution, glances lingered too long or avoided her entirely. It was clear that today something would happen. She tried to steady her breath as she entered, the polished floors reflecting her quiet steps. She began her chores, but each task felt different. The dusting, the sweeping, the mopping all were tinged with anticipation. Every corner might hold a new confrontation, every doorway a new whisper. She moved with careful attention, listening more than speaking, aware of the fragile balance that had been maintained for the last few days. By mid-morning, a supervisor approached her with a serious expression. "We need to speak with you," he said. She nodded, heart quickening, and followed him down the hallway. This time, the office was not empty. The billionaire stood near the window, his presence commanding and calm. The supervisors flanked him, their expressions unreadable. "You have been the center of many stories these past days," he said. "We need the truth, and we need it now." She straightened, meeting his gaze. "I have done nothing wrong," she said, voice steady, but filled with the tension of the past days. "I returned the phone I found. I have only done my work. I have not tried to get attention or manipulate anyone." He studied her for a long moment, his eyes searching for anything that might reveal dishonesty. The room was silent, the weight of the truth pressing down on everyone present. Finally, he turned to the supervisors. "Check the records," he said. "Talk to the staff. See if this story has any merit." The supervisors nodded, moving quickly to gather information. Meanwhile, she stood quietly, aware that this was her chance to let the truth emerge. She did not need to speak further. The facts would prove her honesty. By late morning, the first signs of change appeared. The supervisors returned, papers in hand. They had spoken to the staff, reviewed schedules, and examined the sequence of events. Whispers had been traced to a single source, someone who had deliberately started the rumor out of envy and mischief. The billionaire motioned for her to step forward. "The truth has come to light," he said. "You were honest and diligent, and yet someone tried to manipulate perception against you. That will not be tolerated in this house." A wave of relief washed over her. Her knees weakened slightly, but she held her ground. She had survived the storm, and now, for the first time in days, she felt a glimmer of safety and recognition. The person who had spread the lie was confronted. Their denials fell away in the face of evidence. Apologies were demanded, explanations given, and the atmosphere in the mansion shifted. Where tension had ruled, clarity and fairness now began to take root. Staff whispered to each other, but this time with shame and regret rather than judgment. Throughout the day, she continued her work, but the weight had lifted slightly. People who had avoided her now offered quiet gestures of respect, a nod, a small smile, a word of encouragement. The mansion, once cold and hostile, seemed to breathe easier, as if the truth had cleared the air. By evening, she was called to the main office once more. The billionaire stood by the window, the last light of the sun reflecting off the polished floors. "You handled yourself with dignity," he said. "Not everyone would have endured what you did and remained honest." She felt a deep sense of gratitude and disbelief. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. "I only did what was right." He nodded, a hint of approval in his eyes. Sometimes the world tests us with lies, and it is our character that determines the outcome. You have proven yours. She left the office, walking through the mansion with a new sense of confidence. The whispers had faded, replaced by normal conversations. Staff no longer glanced at her with suspicion. She realized that one day of endurance and honesty, had changed everything. On the bus ride home, she reflected on the past days. Fear, doubt, and tension had ruled her life, but truth and integrity had emerged victorious. The lie that had threatened to destroy her had instead highlighted her strength and patience. She had survived the storm and emerged with her dignity intact. Back in her room, she sat quietly, feeling the exhaustion and relief intertwine. The small victories, the gestures of recognition, and the restoration of her reputation were all she needed. She had faced judgment, scrutiny, and falsehood, and yet she had prevailed. As she lay down to sleep, she thought about the lessons she had learned. Honesty, patience, and resilience could withstand even the most destructive forces. One day had changed everything, indeed, but it had not broken her. She closed her eyes, finally at peace, ready to face whatever the future might bring with courage and integrity. The next morning, the world felt lighter. She woke early, not because of worry or anticipation, but because of a quiet sense of relief that had settled in her chest. The events of the previous days had changed everything. The lie that had once controlled her life had been exposed, and her honesty had earned recognition. Yet she knew that life was not going to magically be perfect overnight. There were still responsibilities, work to do, and lessons to learn. She dressed in her uniform carefully, smoothing every crease, tying her hair neatly. Even now, she felt a lingering wariness. She had been tested and she had survived. She had learned to watch carefully, to listen, and to move with both caution and confidence. Today felt like a continuation, a new beginning. She wanted to embrace it fully. As she entered the mansion, the atmosphere had shifted. Staff no longer cast suspicious glances. The whispers that had haunted her were now replaced by quiet conversations or respectful nods. She noticed small Chinjiza coworker offering a gentle smile, someone holding a door open without hesitation. It was subtle, but it carried meaning. It was the acknowledgement of her truth, her patience, and her integrity. Her tasks began as usual: cleaning rooms, arranging furniture, dusting surfaces, and mopping floors. But this time, each motion felt different. There was a sense of freedom, a lightness that had been absent for days. She moved with a quiet confidence, aware of the eyes around her, but no longer afraid of them. The mansion still felt like a world apart from her own life, but it no longer felt hostile. During the morning, she was asked to assist in preparing a small event in one of the mansion's rooms. The owner himself had requested her help, not because he doubted her, but because he recognized her reliability and attention to detail. She worked with care, setting tables, arranging chairs, and ensuring that every detail was perfect. He watched from a distance, occasionally nodding in approval. It was not praise shouted aloud, but it was significant. A quiet acknowledgement of her abilities and honesty. By midday, she had a chance to speak with a coworker who had supported her quietly throughout the ordeal. "I'm glad the truth is out," the coworker said softly. "People saw what happened, and they respect you for it. I hope you realize how strong you are." She smiled faintly, feeling a warmth that had been absent for too long. "It was hard," she admitted, "but I had to trust that honesty would matter in the end." Her words were simple, yet they carried a weight born from experience. She had endured scrutiny, suspicion, and fear, and now she could reflect on what she had learned: resilience, patience, and the quiet power of integrity. The afternoon brought more activity. The mansion was alive with preparation for the event, and she moved seamlessly among staff, helping wherever needed. No one questioned her motives, no one whispered accusations. Instead, she felt a sense of belonging. A subtle but profound shift from invisibility to recognition. The owner of the mansion called her briefly to his office. She approached cautiously, unsure of what he might ask or say. "You handled yourself with dignity," he said simply. "In a place filled with power and influence, it is not always easy to remain true to yourself." "You did." She nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude and quiet pride. "Thank you, sir," she said. "I only tried to do what was right." The rest of the afternoon passed smoothly. Tasks were completed efficiently, the mansion was prepared, and the staff moved with a renewed sense of purpose. She noticed smiles and gestures of acknowledgement more often now. Respect, once withheld, had been earned. As the evening approached, the event began. She assisted in final preparations, ensuring that every detail was perfect. The atmosphere was filled with energy, conversation, and laughter. She moved among the rooms, observing the interactions, feeling a sense of accomplishment in her work and a quiet satisfaction in how the day had unfolded. After the event concluded, she sat quietly in one of the now empty rooms, watching the last lights dim and listening to the faint sounds of the mansion settling into the night. The lie that had once threatened her life and reputation had been exposed, but more importantly, she had proven to herself and to others the strength of her character. Her phone buzzed with messages from coworkers, but this time they were words of encouragement, congratulations, and quiet acknowledgement of her perseverance. She responded with thanks, feeling connected and supported in a way that had been absent before. As she walked home that night, the streets were calm, the air crisp. She felt a sense of closure and hope. One day, one lie, and several long hours of doubt and fear had passed. And yet, from that day forward, she knew that honesty, patience, and resilience could carry her through anything. Arriving at her room, she sat on the bed and reflected on the journey. The fear, the tension, the whispers they had tested her, shaped her, and ultimately strengthened her. She closed her eyes, feeling the exhaustion of the day and the relief of truth. She had endured, and she had emerged stronger. In the quiet of her room, she made a silent promise to herself. No matter what challenges lay ahead, she would hold on to her honesty, her patience, and her resilience. She would face life with courage, and she would never let lies, whispers, or doubt control her again. That night, she slept peacefully, finally free from fear, finally embraced by truth, and finally aware of her own strength. One day had changed everything, but it had also revealed the power within her to endure, to persevere, and to rise above any challenge. The world was still vast and unpredictable, but she was ready, and for the first time in a long while, she felt truly at peace.